In regards to bald eagles, is it considered scientifically taboo to apply human emotions to them? I've noticed the anthropomorphic observations have been made quite often. Boy, I guess we know, and people done a lot of studies about animals and what they do know and what they don't know and what they can do. I always look at it as mostly it's inbred behavior, it's instinct, it's what and it seems amazing what they can do. Just like we know that birds of prey can travel to different continents and then come right back to the same area almost the same exact day each year, even with some of the changes in climate that are happening that we're seeing over the last decade or so. It seems like they still show up at the same time of year, and they've got that ability to geographically locate and hone in where they're going. So many aspects of what they do are amazing. We can't understand it. Researchers try to figure that out, and I know Amy mentioned some things about their ability to align with different factors of their surroundings. But as far as cognitive abilities and thinking and cognitively feeling pain and things like that, it's only just a jerk reaction of an animal like that. So I guess
I'm going to give you a little different opinion than John, but I am going to preface this. This is something that gets argued about a lot. It is far from settled. When Jane Goodall started her work with chimpanzees, you would never ever give an animal a name, and considering that an animal could possibly have an emotion was as unscientific as you could get. Just turn in your PhD badge and get out of here. Now, Frans der Waal, who's a great primatologist, just did a book on animal emotion, and in listening to him talk, what he'll say is that yes, animals do have emotions. However, we make a mistake when we think they have the same emotions that we do all of the time. So personally, I think that we see some emotion there, because I don't believe they're emotionless, but they don't have the same emotions or the same behaviors that we do. If we had a child die, for example, we would not then take the child apart and feed it to our other children. That would never happen, but we see it in eagle nests. That's not bad. It's just the way they live. Similarly, well, I believe that they're attached to and bonded with their children to some degree when they're in the nest. I don't know what it feels like to have the fishhook call of dispersal pulling at my mind, taking me from everything I've known. I think that must be fascinating. I would love to know what that feels like, but I don't. So, is it scientifically wrong to ascribe any emotion at all? It's been considered so for a long time, but that's starting to change. Do we ascribe them our thoughts and our emotions and our ways of life? No, because then we devalue theirs.
Right. And there's a difference there between primates that are more like humans, right? And then raptors, birds of prey, and others as far as that. Certainly with primates, in other mammals, there would be a little bit more of a scientifically proven possibility of things more like a human. So we don't tend to say they're a deadbeat dad or
no.
Things like that. Those are things that people might try to connect something like that and say, I don't see him here, I think that he should be feeding them, he should know better, and know that he needs to do that, but there is obviously no connection for anything like that. And that's what we try to help remind people. We know that people don't have the same experience that we do in looking at these creatures and these amazing raptors, eagles in this case. So the best we can do is educate, right? That's what one of our prime missions is, with the education of school children and other people that watch these for pleasure and really just to get connected with nature and watch what's going on. So I think it can do a disservice to them and maybe it's more of a problem for the person who's projecting the human tendencies onto an animal like that. That's not what they're experiencing and going through. So that's why we want to try to make sure that people don't make that mistake. So, but it happens.
Yeah, it does. And the deadbeat dad actually was a very good comparison in a case where we're projecting our lives onto their lives. So that was a good example.
And one thing that we noticed, I think a lot of questions came up. There was one specific day I know, because I'm looking at the cameras and moving them around and adjusting light settings between night and day each day since I think September. So get to see it every day. we saw some territorial issues come up, and there were questions about why aren't the parents at the nest and where are they going, what's going on. So we've seen that more at the north nest than I think what we've seen in the past. I know we've seen them notice others flying by at the Decorah original nest, but it seems like it's drawn them away from the nest longer lengths of time up at the Decorah north nest here, and what we've been observing here this year. And we did see a subadult come through, and we saw some really interesting behavior there, some muted calls, and then just the spreading out of the wings to protect the eggs and the young there too. So, okay. Could you explain incubation and why some eaglets wait to start incubation until all eggs have been laid and others do not? So.
We actually just kind of covered that.
Yeah,
it really has to do with temperature. Eagles in the north have to incubate immediately because it's cold out. Eagles in warmer regions do not. So some eagles may delay incubation. I haven't read much about that subject. Eagles in the north do not.
Okay. DN2 seems so submissive to DN1 and also drops its head to mom. What are its survival chances as it gets older? I thought it might struggle, but someone mentioned that it might do better since it has to work to get food now. I've been busy, I've watched just a little bit in the last couple days now after DN1.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen as much of that behavior, but I haven't seen as many feeding events either.
Yeah.
So.
I would guess that DN2 will survive. They're very close in size, they're very close in development, they're doing the same kinds of things, and they have the same kinds of needs. So I think there's an excellent chance for DN2 to survive. I would be very, very surprised if DN2 did not.
At this age. And I think that we've talked or heard that, as age progresses for the eaglet, the chances for the siblicide and dying from something like that are less.
One of the things I'm interested to see personally is if we have kind of a decrease in sort of this dominant submissive behavior as they get older, because in Decorah that did tend to drop off. So I'll be very curious to see if it drops off here. This is a more aggressive nest in general, so maybe it won't.
Right. Okay, let's see, things do move here.
Emu eggs.
All eggs and emu eggs move when a sound is made, such as a whistle or parent call. Do eaglets make sounds before pipping, and can the parents hear it?
Yes, they do. In fact, it's kind of cool. So in the last couple of days before hatching occurs, an eaglet moves, or any bird, moves its head up into the air space at the top of the egg. If you ever had a hard-boiled egg, when you crack the shell, you know how there's that little space in there? So they separate from this membrane inside that's been sort of feeding them diffused oxygen for the whole time, and they start actually breathing air with their lungs for the first time. It's actually one of the reasons that eaglets either tend to die in the first 3 days, embryonic eaglets, in the egg, or in the last 3 days in the egg, because they never use their lungs until they're about the last 3 days in the egg. So after they start using their lungs to breathe air, they start making noises, and the parents will start sounding back at them. Now, it's my understanding that this is really important in an altricial bird like a bald eagle, because bald eagles hatch blind. So part of the way they know that it's their parents in the nest and not something else in the first few days of life, when they're either blind or not seeing very well at all, is the parents have been talking to the eaglets, and the eaglets recognize their parents' voices when they come into the nest. And I sometimes wonder if you listen over at Decorah, what we call mom's tea kettle whistle, which starts real soft. I sometimes wonder if that isn't actually a food soliciting sound that's very similar to young eaglet's food soliciting sound. So at any rate, yes, they do make sounds before they hatch, and the parents and the children talk back and forth to one another prior to hatch, which I think is just super cool. Is it possible that the mother eagle chose not to feed DNN3 because of the lack of food availability, or did she detect something unknown to us, such as a physical deformity or lack of development? John, what's your thoughts?
I guess what I've just straight observation is it's been whoever's been closest seems to be the one who gets fed. So I guess that would relate back to I don't think it's much choosing. We did see some cases where both mom and dad were feeding at the same time, so there's a higher probability that there might be distributed and food being distributed at the same time if both parents are there with food at the same time. I guess most of what I've observed is whichever one is closest and whichever one is reaching up closest to where the food is. I guess the other interesting thing with the new cams that we noticed this year, it's a little bit off topic, is to see how eagles will place the food by their tongue, very carefully placing and releasing that food with their tongue.
Pushing it in, yeah,
it was
very cool to see.
We've been seeing that kind of detail.
But, we can't really know if there was a physical deformity. My own guess, and this is a guess, when the few times we were able to isolate DM3 and then compare DM3 with the Decorah eagles at a similar age, right up until the end, the physical development looked pretty normal to me, and it did sort of in that first, roughly 5-7 day period, because they really started to pull apart in growth on about May 2nd. But the two older eagles were entering their steepest phase of growth. You have to understand that a bald eagle attains most of its weight and structural features in the first 40 days of life in the nest, and really most of that happens in the first 30 days of life. So they went into their really steep growth curve, and DM3 just got left behind. It's normal, though. That's not necessarily a physical deformity or developmental issue. Is there anything bald eagles don't like to eat?
The stuff that they don't eat.
Okay. They eat fish. They eat birds. They eat mammals. They eat live. Yeah. They eat dead. I've never seen an eagle bring a snake into the nest, but I assume they would.
We saw fawn deer parts. So
we saw fawn deer parts, yep.
They'll eat venison. They'll eat...
they eat placenta.
Yeah, and I think, we've seen a difference in behavior of geographic location of eagles, probably because just of animal raising activities in the Midwest, and just putting animals out that die. The eagles and other birds, turkey vultures, others will go to those areas to get food and feed. So we know that they like just about anything that's got protein, and that's it could be alive if it's a fish, or dead. So
one thing that we saw a couple of years ago, it wasn't at our cam, it was in Florida, and I don't know which Florida cam it was. Somebody put a pot roast out for the eagles, and they brought it to the nest. That's not a good idea. There are things you don't want to feed eagles. For example, people who find injured birds of prey will sometimes try to feed them hamburger. You shouldn't do that because it has a really high fat content. Fat is mixed in to make hamburger, and that can get onto their feathers and harm it into their feathers. So, is there anything wild that an eagle won't eat? I haven't seen it. In fact, they eat turtles at Fort St. Vrain along the Mississippi River. But can we put anything out and feed them with it, like pot roast and hamburger? No, don't do that.
Okay. I'm just going to go with the one I see here. Did this pair originally build this nest, or was it there?
This pair originally built this nest. The only eagle's nest we ever did build was N2B, and the story behind that is probably most of you know. The tree snapped in the wind and the nest fell. Bob was very distressed about it, and our friend Neil Reddick said, hey, why don't we try building a nest? And we did, and it worked. But building eagle's nest is not commonly something we do. I think it's a useful management tool, but it's not something we do normally.
Right. So we believe that this pair did build the nest.
Okay, so we have how long does it take to build a nest, and how long does the nest last? In 2012, the Decorah eagles decided they were done with N1. We don't know why. Some eagles do build multiple nests, and they decided to build N2. So they began in October. They hatched young for the first year in 2013. So October, November, December, January, February. So 5 months. They can build their nest very quickly. The nest will last, as far as we can tell, unless the tree splits or the eagles abandon the nest, as long as the eagles continue to work on it. So they're constantly replenishing the nest with grass and sticks and so on and so forth. Some nests last a very long time. The largest bald eagle nest ever was 9 feet wide and 20 feet deep. It weighed over 2 tons. That took a long time to build. But sometimes eagles also abandon their nests very quickly, and we don't really know why.
So, at least part of the nest that we put up there as a starter nest, we saw about a growth, in just a couple months, we saw additional 3 feet in diameter, added at least 1.5 feet on both sides, and almost 3 feet to probably 3 feet in vertical height, just in a 2-month period. So they can build pretty fast, and you guys have seen the stick delivery, and and fighting and placement. Just it's really funny behavior. You know, we've seen one hook the other one with a Y-shaped branch, and them doing tug of war. And Bob always believed that, at least in Decorah, that the male would always have to reposition every stick, but I don't know. That the female brought in.
Okay, so the second question we got, does DN1 seem advanced for its age? We could see it trying to self-feed, picking up loose bits of food and eating them, and also appearing to try to feed on DN3 the night before DN3 died. Would getting the lion's share of the food cause an eagle to develop any faster than normal? So there are some physical constraints that it can't really develop, I guess, faster than it can build cells and structure. So, personally, I don't think it's a precocial eagle in watching it. If you look at the time frame, they've got 80 days in the nest. The first 40 are spent growing body parts and getting big and developing these behaviors, and the last 40 days are spent growing feathers, wing exercising, flapping, right. Learning how to, they'll start self-feeding, but really learning how to unzip a fish, really tear into it, mantling food, and so on and so forth. So personally, I don't think DN1 was more advanced than I would expect an eagle to be when I compare them against the data we have from the Decorah eagles. They look well within the framework of normal right. eagle development to us.
We can certainly say from what we saw that it wouldn't have had any delays in growth because of lack of food.
Yeah, that's a fact.
It was getting, we saw a very full crop most of the time, and as Amy mentioned before, that is stored and it can be eaten and used after, that's what the crop is there for, is to store food for future digestion and use.
So a lack of food or anything that really takes energy away from growth can delay growth, but a surplus of food, because they can only build body as fast as they can build body, I don't think is going to make a tremendous difference.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll sleep more. It's been just a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Keep watching, and we'll do our best to keep answering questions.